Let's see. So today is the second Sunday of June, and as I think most of you know who are temple regulars, if we were at the temple right now, we'd all be getting up out of the Hondo and walking over to the conference room, right, and having a discussion. And so, we obviously can't do that in this live stream era. But I thought that a little later we could try a little bit of an interactive discussion using Facebook's comments. And so I'll reserve some time for that. So for my talk, let me begin by first briefly discussing the very first line of the Shoshinge that we just chanted. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because my talk today has a kind of Namu Amida Butsu kind of theme, and the first line of the Shoshinge, which is Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai, is essentially another expression of Namu Amida Butsu. So let me briefly explain that one. In my understanding, Kimyo means take refuge, Muryoju means infinite life, and Nyorai refers to essentially an enlightened being or a Buddha, somebody who has come from, as we say, come from suchness, or who has come from ultimate truth and reality. The other term is Tathagata, but we can just say suchness, the Buddha, or they come from suchness. And so in the Shoshinge, this is referring specifically to Amida Buddha, this Tathagata or enlightened being. So Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai can be translated as just as Namu Amida Butsu can be translated. I take refuge in Amida Buddha, or I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite life. But interestingly, according to the author of the Shoshinge, Shinran Shonin, Kimyo also has the meaning of calling. And in his writing, Shinran clarifies the meaning of Kimyo. He says, quote, "In the term Kimyo, to take refuge, ki means to arrive at, and myo means to invite, to command, and to summon. Therefore, since muryoju refers to infinite life, the phrase Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai can be understood as a calling or a command. Return to and reunite your life with immeasurable life. Recognize your life as being one with all life." The person that gave us that understanding in our Wednesday night study class, one of them was Michael Conway, and I've also read this, Dr. Michael Conway. I've also read this elsewhere, but so that's a very really kind of potent understanding of Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai and Namu Amida Butsu. And so at our last Wednesday night study class, we read this handout which is called "What is a Buddhist?" And this handout featured the ideas of Dr. Nobuo Haneda, who I've often quoted, as many of you know. And in this handout, which is excerpts from his essay, "What is a Buddhist?" Haneda Sensei expresses the same thought as Shinran's Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai, but instead of Shinran's idea of returning to or realizing the oneness of all life that we are a part of, Haneda Sensei emphasizes instead the attitude or mind that encompasses all life, the attitude or mind that encompasses all life. But clearly, returning to and realizing our oneness with all life requires an attitude or mind that encompasses all life. And so, I think that both Shinran and Haneda Sensei are basically referring to the same insight. And this insight is their understanding of what it means, in the deepest sense, to be a Buddhist. So let me go on now and share some excerpts from Dr. Haneda's What is a Buddhist essay. Okay, so Haneda Sensei begins this essay by stating, quote, "Buddhism means realizing an all-embracing attitude, nothing else. It means realizing a broad and empty mind that can encompass all. It means realizing a position in which I can learn and appreciate from all kinds of things, a position in which I do not assume any relative or antagonistic relationships with them. I can talk about this with a simple illustration. Suppose there is a basket that contains all kinds of fruits, such as an apple, an orange, a pear, a peach, etc. To me, religions that have fixed dogmas or creeds are like fruits in the basket. We can compare these religions just as we compare the fruits in the basket. But Buddhism is not a fruit in the basket. It is itself the basket that holds all kinds of fruits. Buddhism has no fixed dogma, creed, or doctrine. If Buddhism has one, then it can be compared with another dogma, but Buddhism does not have any dogma or creed that can be compared. We can compare an apple with an orange or an orange with a peach, but we cannot compare an apple with a basket. Here, some people may disagree with me and say that there are doctrines, ideas, and concepts in Buddhism. Yes, there are certainly ideas and concepts taught in Buddhism, but they are not fixed doctrines to become attached to or carried around by us. They are cures for sickness. They are something like Drano that is used for eliminating a clog in a pipe. When water regains its smooth and natural flow, Drano is no longer necessary. Buddhist ideas and concepts are antidotes against the poison of human attachment. Buddhist teachers challenge us with ideas such as impermanence and emptiness and destroy our attachment. These ideas are totally different from the dogmas that many other religions have. So let me just briefly interject here that the attachments that Haneda Sensei is referring to, I think most definitely includes the attachment that we all have to our own ethnicity, right? And so, obviously this kind of attachment to our own ethnicity is, I think, arguably, it's at the heart of all racial prejudices, right? And also, the various fruits in the basket that Haneda Sensei is talking about don't just represent religions. They ultimately represent the infinite diversity of all life. All life, I think, is contained in or embraced by the basket. This is what I think he's saying. Haneda Sensei then continues his essay by discussing the sutra, or the teaching of the Buddha that tells the story of Amida Buddha that we've been talking about. The most important thing in Buddhism is the realization of a humble attitude, a broad and empty mind, or an all-encompassing mind. This all-embracing mind is called Amida Buddha. In the larger sutra, we read a story in which the seeker Dharmakara becomes a Buddha by the name of Amida Buddha. Dharmakara initially vows that he will become a Buddha and create a land where he will encompass all beings. Then he takes up practices to become a Buddha. His main practice is visiting and worshiping many Buddhas in the 10 directions and studying under them. So let me clarify here that I think most of you know that the largest sutra is the most important sutra, or sermon of the Buddha in our Pure Land tradition, and that the land that the sutra talks about is in fact the Pure Land. But this is not a geographic land or a geographic place. It's really the realm, or we could say the manifestation of this all-encompassing attitude or mind that Haneda Sensei is talking about. So let's see. Then Haneda Sensei continues, quote, "The more Buddhas he visits and worships, the humbler he becomes. The humbler he becomes, the more Buddhas he visits and worships. In this way, the number of Buddhas he discovers increases. When he discovers innumerable Buddhas and his whole being becomes worshipping and studying, his Buddhahood is fulfilled. He becomes a Buddha by the name of Namu Amida Butsu, bowing Amida Buddha. So bowing is part of his name. In this way, Amida Buddha symbolizes the spirit of a perfect student. He has realized an ocean-like mind that can study and appreciate innumerable beings, innumerable Buddhas in the 10 directions, end quote. And so here, what Haneda Sensei is saying is that this humble attitude of the seeker Dharmakata that leads him to become Amida Buddha is sort of indicating a kind of supreme inquisitiveness, a supreme openness about all teachings and teachers. This is the broad, all-encompassing, all-embracing mind of Amida Buddha. And then finally, Haneda Sensei ends his essay by stating, quote, "In summary, there are two ways of defining Buddhism. One is identifying it with a fruit in the basket. The other is identifying it with the basket itself. If Buddhism is a fruit in the basket, a specific doctrine, such a Buddhism is so narrow and limited, it is not the true Buddhism. If Buddhism is a doctrine that can be compared with other doctrines, that is a misunderstanding of what Shakyamuni Buddha taught. If Buddhism means such a limited thing, I do not want to become a Buddhist. But if Buddhism means the basket itself, if it means the realization of a broad and empty mind, an ocean-like mind, an all-encompassing mind, I want to become a Buddhist. If Buddhist means a person who can worship all kinds of teachers and study under them, I want to be called a Buddhist. Don't become a fruit in the basket. Become the basket. Appreciate all kinds of fruits in the basket. Buddhism is appreciating all kinds of teachers and teachings. Let us study from all. We are, after all human beings. We share the same human suffering and the same human aspirations," end quote. So this is the handout that we discussed in our Wednesday night study class. And I think, in both the essay that we just heard, Dr. Haneda's essay, and in the beginning line of Shinran Shoshinge, I think what we get is a glimpse not of what a Buddhist believes, and not of what the Buddhist doctrines are, the so-called doctrines are. Instead, I think what we get is actually a glimpse of what it means to be awakened. It's not a matter of the doctrines, the theories, or the myths, or so forth that one believes. It's a matter of having this humble, bowing, listening attitude of Namu Amida Butsu. And so one final point I wanted to make about the relevance of all this to our contemporary issues. I think maybe some of you think that this idea of a humble, bowing, listening attitude makes Namu Amida Butsu to seem like a kind of passive attitude. And you might wonder, well, what is the relevance of this kind of teaching or this kind of attitude to the issues of social justice that our society is currently focused on? But in my understanding, there actually is a great relevance. And I think this is because Namu Amida Butsu also expresses what we could call the essential Mahayana emphasis on compassion. So the Mahayana, is the large branch of Buddhism that developed a few centuries in the centuries following Shakyamuni Buddha's death, and this branch of Buddhism, of which our Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhist tradition is a part of, that this branch of Buddhism especially emphasizes compassion. And so, to borrow Dr. Haneda's Drano analogy, personally, I think that the Namu in Namu Amida Butsu represents the wisdom of me realizing my need for Drano, the need to unclog the obstruction caused by my self-attachment. And then, with my ego obstruction cleared, the natural result is the compassion of Amida Butsu, the realization of my interconnectedness with all life. And obviously, I think in the same way that Namu and Amida Butsu are always recited together, the wisdom and compassion that they represent always accompanies each other. In other words, you can't have this deep Buddhist wisdom of Namu and not have this compassion of Amida Butsu. Or conversely, if you have the compassion of Amida Butsu, this all-encompassing mind, you can't have that without the deep insight into the clog in the pipe that is our ego attachment. They go hand in hand. And the arising of this deep aspiration to be of benefit to others, this compassionate aspiration, and then the understanding of our interconnectedness and oneness with all life, this is the true gift of Buddhism. I think this is the essence of the basket. This is the essence of the all-embracing attitude of Namo Amida Butsu. So let's see, that's my talk. Namo Amida Butsu.